This conference will now be recorded.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Friday noon calls from Oral Health Kansas. This is our third call of the session, and these calls were created just to be a resource to Kansas and help talk through some of the things that are happening at the Capitol, and then also provide an opportunity for questions that you guys might be having. So we will go ahead and hop in, and I just want to remind everyone that these calls are recorded. My name is Christy Nance, and I'm the Policy Director here at Oral Health Kansas. So jumping right into state policy, one of the most exciting things happening at the Capitol around dental this session has been the fiscal year 2020 budget. This year, Oral Health Kansas has worked closely with the Kansas Dental Association to advocate for increased reimbursement rates for dental providers enrolled in our CanCare network. And we talked on our last Friday noon call about the budget process and how we're working to get a reimbursement rate increase in the Kansas Department of Health and Environment budget. And so I wanted to recap quickly the steps we have gone through so far, and later I'll touch on our next steps and what we have left. So far, we have testified in both the Senate Ways and Means Subcommittee on Health and the House Social Services Budget Committee, asking for a reimbursement rate increase be included in the KDHE budget. And we are happy to report that a rate increase has passed in both of those subcommittees. And the KDHE budget was then presented before the full budget committees, which is the Senate Ways and Means and House Appropriations. And both of those committees chose to pass the budget with the rate increase included. So we are really excited. And this is the language that was included in the House and the Senate. They are a little bit different, and so we will have to negotiate that later on. But the House language says add $3 million, including $1.3 million from the State General Fund, to increase Medicaid dental reimbursement rates for fiscal year 2020. And then the Senate says add language to require the agency set Medicaid dental reimbursement rates to 50% of commercial market rates for fiscal year 2020. So they're very different language. The House just appropriates a set dollar amount, whereas the Senate sets a percent. And the Senate, if we were to raise the rates to 50%, that fiscal note came out to $2.8 million. So the Senate actually has appropriated more money for reimbursement rates. The language is just a little bit different. So the next step, both of the budgets will be presented on the Senate and House floor. And if they pass through both of those, it'll go to conference committee to finalize what language they want to include. So if they want to take some of the House and some of the Senate, there will be a conference committee that we work with to help finalize that language. And I just want to touch briefly on why we want these increased reimbursement rates. The current reimbursement rates are around 40% of what commercial insurance reimburses at, and those rates have not been increased since 2001. So whenever a dentist sees a Medicaid client, they are eating 60% of that cost of seeing that patient. Approximately 30% of the dentists in the state currently accept Medicaid. And from the legislators that we've talked to, they've been hearing from dentists in their communities, and dentists have been telling them that they're actually, it is costing them to see patients with Medicaid. And so that is why our number is so low for the number of dentists that we have enrolled in Medicaid. So we are hoping that with a reimbursement rate of 60 to 65%, we could get more dentists to enroll in Medicaid and also allow those current dentists enrolled to accept more Medicaid patients. Our ask of the legislators was 60% reimbursement rate. This number came from research that we had done from other states where they saw 60% was a great negotiating factor of drawing in more dentists. And so we didn't quite get 60% from either the House or the Senate, but we were excited to get some sort of increase. So. The other topic that has been really popular right now, as of just the last couple of days actually, has been Medicaid expansion. So Medicaid expansion for the past few years has really not been heard in the Kansas legislature. There have been bills, but the leadership has been stopping them from reaching the floor of the Senate or the House. So on Wednesday, Representative Kathy Wolf-Moore took House Bill 2066, which was previously a bill focused on nurse practitioners and had passed out of committee and made it to the floor. She gutted that bill and replaced it with language to expand Medicaid. There was a long debate on the House floor on Wednesday with a lot of amendments, and they agreed to have a final vote on Thursday. And so on Thursday in the House, they took their final vote and it passed 69 to 54. So this just kind of popped out of nowhere and passed through the House. And so the next steps, it will head to the Senate and we'll go through committee and hopefully reach the Senate floor again. But be on the lookout from Oral Health Kansas for advocacy alerts on contacting your senators and making sure that we can expand Medicaid to over 130,000 Kansans. So keep an eye out on your email for that. So those were the two main policy updates that I had. So this is hearings of interest from past weeks and then what we're going to see in the next 2 weeks. As I've kind of talked about, there were a lot of budget hearings over the past 2 weeks, just kind of working through different agency budgets and getting a whole budget put together. And over the next 2 weeks, the House and Senate will be on the floor most of that time working through bills, including the budget. And that is because April 5th is Drop Dead Day, which is the last day bills can be considered. The only things they will consider after this are bills vetoed by the governor and the omnibus budget. And that is just certain budget items that didn't get included in the original budget that they will be working before that date. So after April 5th, they will take first adjournment, which is April 6th through April 30th. And then veto session will begin on May 1st. And that will go until they get everything they need to done for the session. Including a final budget. So a couple of busy weeks before April 5th and then a little bit of time off, and then we dive right back in to close things out for session. A couple of weeks ago, we weren't able to do our Friday noon call due to an OHK board meeting, and I sent out a link requesting questions that you all would like answers to. And this was one of the questions that we got, how to write testimony. So every week, committees release an agenda, and on those agendas, you will see opportunities for public testimony. So this is an example of an agenda, and this agenda is actually from when Oral Health Kansas provided public testimony before the House Social Services Budget Committee on the Kansas Department of Health and Environment budget. So on here, you will see, let me see if I can get a highlighter out. You'll see what committee it is. And then this is really what we looked for, was a budget hearing for a KDHE, and they wanted public testimony. And so what I did when I saw that is I contacted Tony, who's the committee assistant, and you just call him at the number listed. And you tell him that you want to submit testimony for the KDHE budget hearing on March 7th in social services budget. And he will take down your information and ask for you to send him a PDF of the testimony along with hard copies by a certain date. And usually that date is 24 hours before the hearing. And then you'll deliver the hard copies to Tony at his office. And he will also want to know if your testimony is verbal or written. And then if this is for a specific bill, say dental therapists, or like the Medicaid expansion bill, you will also add if you're a proponent or opponent of the bill, or you can also be neutral. So that's a lot of information, but the committee assistants are always really helpful, and they walk you through, everything they need and when they need it by. And I will also add that on here you can see the time of the committee hearing and the room that they'll be in. And then this name down here is the chair of the committee. So Tony is located in Representative Carpenter's office. All right. Oops. I went too far. There we go. So that was really how to submit testimony, but I also wanted to make sure I answered how to write testimony. So these are kind of the keys that I have when I sit down to write testimony. First is just keep it short. They receive a lot of testimony, a lot of emails, and so keeping it short, sweet, and to the point is really essential to making sure they hear what you want them to hear. We try to stick to one page, usually just front, but you can also include front back if needed. Make sure to introduce yourself and your organization. Even if you know everyone on the committee, it's still important to introduce yourself in your organization. They have people before them all day long, and so just a refresher is always important. And you can also submit testimony as a private citizen. So if you do, just introduce yourself and that you are a private citizen. Make sure to include contact information. This is so that they can reach out to you if they want additional information. This happens all the time, so make sure you include that in there so they don't have to ask for it. Bold your ask. This is something that I am not always good at, but I think it's important to just bold your ask, because even if it is one page, they may have 30 testimonies to read for one bill, and if you just bold your ask, if they don't have time to read through your entire testimony, they can at least, you can make sure that they take away what you want them to. Also, thank them for the opportunity to submit testimony. I think it's always important to thank our legislators and our Congress members. And then include your signature on it as well. So this is an example of testimony that we submitted to the House Committee on Social Services budget. So sticking with that budget committee that we looked at the agenda of earlier. So I will just point out on here that, the date, what committee the testimony is for, write down the chairman and members of the committee. This first paragraph is where I introduce myself and Oral Health Kansas. And then I made our ask bold, or at least our different topics that we wanted to touch on. So that way, in case one of them drew them in more, they could read that paragraph. And then I always close with, don't hesitate to contact me if you have any questions. And I include my contact information and I sign it. If you're an organization, printing on your letterhead, of course, is always makes it look a little more professional. And this is just our format. Every organization kind of has their own format on how they submit testimony and what it looks like. And a lot of people post their testimony on their website. So feel free to check out other organizations and see which one fits you or your organization best. This testimony was for a bill that was in the House, And I just wanted to show that when we submit testimony either for or against a bill, that we always add in the first paragraph what our position is. So for this one, it was thank you for the opportunity to submit testimony in opposition to Senate Bill 32. And that's just because, you know, just in case they stop reading after this first paragraph, they'll at least know what we want from them is to oppose the bill. This was another question that we received, and it is, does Medicaid reimburse for fluoride treatments for children? And the answer is yes. Both dental professionals and medical professionals can be reimbursed for fluoride treatments on children. And if you need additional information on that, feel free to reach out to me and I can send you contact information. I also wanted to mention that we now post all of these calls on our website, the recordings for them, so they can be found under Advocacy update calls, and then they will all be listed right here. This call probably won't be uploaded until next week, but it will be on here as well. And then if you want to invite anyone else to sign up for the call, they can do that on here as well. So you could just send them the link. And then I'll also show you that our testimony is also listed on our website. So you can scroll down and you can see, you know, the history of us submitting testimony, and then also more recent work as well. So that is all I have today. If you guys ever have any questions that you would like us to answer on these calls, feel free to either email myself or include it in the chat box, and I can record it for the next call. But that is all I have today. Do we have any questions about stuff I went over today, or any comments? Awesome. All right. Well, I hope you guys all have a wonderful weekend, and we will talk to you all in 2 weeks on our next call on April 5th.